Hi, my name is Sophia Ellis, and this is my development timeline as compared to Jean Piaget's cognitive development theory. As you can see, I've provided my timeline, which I will dive into deeper throughout this presentation, and I have also provided a key to show the differentiation in stages among my timeline. The first stage is the sensorimotor stage, which is from birth to about 2 years old. At this age, the child uses their senses and motor skills, so they begin seeing and feeling more as well as moving around. I remember my mom used to say that I put everything in la boca, so she was always saying that I was putting things in my mouth at this age. Here are some pretty common toys and tools that we see for a child during this age. So you can see that they have the little silverware as well as some sensory toys. At this age, we see a lot of sucking and grasping, so you can see that that silverware is meant to be grasped onto, and that those toys you can easily suck on. In terms of my insights, I found that a lot of items for kids this age were meant for grasping, as well as sucking on as a way to support teething. You can see in this picture here that in the first photo, I'm grasping onto my grandma's shirt. And in the second photo, which was a little bit before I was 2 years old, I was grasping onto my food. The second stage of life is the preoperational stage, which is from 2 to 7 years old. During this stage, I used symbols to represent objects in the world. I remember that I used to genderize the alphabet in different numbers. For example, I always thought that A was a female and B was a male. I would also symbolize tables as like a house or jungle gym for my toys, and I would always play in my grandma's antique table sets. During this stage of life, we see a lot of egocentrism, which means that we believe that everyone sees the world exactly as they do. I remember during Christmas one year, I told my parents, "That's it," referring to the amount of gifts that I got for Christmas. And now, when I think back to that time, I think about how insensitive that is. But at that time, I couldn't place myself into the shoes of my parents. So, and there's a picture to represent Christmas. In terms of my insights, I learned about how I used to have a lot of imaginative play, and I had a lot of main character energy. You can see the photos in this timeline here. In the center photo, I was playing dress up with my sisters, supporting imaginative play. And you can also see that in the third photo as well, when I was 7 years old with my stuffed animal. The third stage is the concrete operational stage. This is from 7 to 11 years old. This is where the child has an improvement in their ability to think logically. So, for example, when I was in elementary school, I wrote a short novel called The Princess Wars, which was about a little fight between the Disney princesses. And this demonstrates my ability to think more logically than I could in the previous stage. In addition, I had started my own little business where I was making these pencil jars out of lunchroom water bottles and milk cartons. During this time, we also see seriation, and this is when we arrange things in a logical progression, for example, from smallest to largest. I remember that my fifth grade teacher had these names arranged into groups on the floor one day, and he wanted us to identify what they had in common. And it took us a long time, but it turns out that it was that each name was organized by the number of syllables. So that's kind of an example of seriation. In terms of my insights, I learned that at this time of life, we tend to see more problem solving skills as well as these children being able to form more individual opinions. The last stage of life is the formal operational stage. This is from 11 years old to an adult. During this time of life, we see abstract and purely symbolic thinking. So, for example, I had to study a lot of history in high school, so there was a lot of memorization there. So I began using symbols and associations to help me study. In college, I was in a poetry club and I used a lot of symbols there as well. During this time of life, we also have the ability to deal with potential or hypothetical situations. So I remember in sixth grade, I had to do the science fair, and there's a lot of hypothetical thinking when it comes to science. In addition, I remember in middle school, we were introduced to metaphors and irony, kind of supporting that symbolic thinking as well. In terms of my insights, I learned that work becomes harder over time. When I was moving from sixth grade to in the middle of college, I know that the work became significantly more difficult over time, kind of supporting the more abstract thinking. And I noticed that there were more open ended questions as well, supporting that potential or hypothetical situation. And here are my references. Thank you so much.